Hi, I'm Raffaella Ciavatta. I am a co-founder and organizer for Collectively Free, which is a network of activists. And I live in New York currently. I do graphic design and art direction and fight for animal liberation. Collectively Free is a network of activists. I like to call it more of a network than, I guess, a group or an organization, just because one of our goals is to unify and connect activists. So I like to call it more of a network of activists. And obviously, our main goal is animal liberation. However, we focus a lot our message on intersectional approaches, so talking about all sorts of oppression and how they connect with animal liberation in our actions and in our internal commitments as well. Intersectionality is actually a concept that was coined by Black feminists, more precisely by Kimberly Crenshaw. At the time, the feminist movement wasn't talking about race issues, and the civil rights movement wasn't talking about gender. So what Kimberly Crenshaw basically says is that we cannot think about forms of oppression as independent and separate from each other. The feminists were very discouraged by the fact that this movement that was fighting for race equality was not including women. If we think about civil rights movement, we barely see any women, right, that were portrayed as leaders, but there were so many women that fought for racial equality. So if they were addressing gender issues as well, the women would have gotten way more attention and the credit that they deserved. So when we think about animal rights, I've seen a lot of examples, unfortunately, of activists who are either racists or sexist or homophobic, but that they fight for animal liberation, right? So in our view, we cannot fight one form of oppression by being oppressive, right? So I think the main goal with our group, and that I hope that other people see it as well, is that, yeah, sure, this person is fighting for animal liberation, but they should be aware of all the other forms of oppression, that they are being oppressive as well. And the big thing about this is that when we are outside, when we are fighting for animal rights, and we start being homophobic or sexist, we are preventing new members from coming into our movement, because they're going to say, look at those animal rights people. You know, they don't care about racial equality, they don't care about LGBTQ rights, they don't care about, women's rights. But in fact, all these oppressions they all kind of have the same system. They all operate under the same systemic sort of oppression. And the other very important part is that nobody talks about animal rights except animal rights people. We never see feminists talking about animal rights. We never see groups that fight for racial equality talking about animal rights. So this is a big issue, that our cause for animal liberation is not being mentioned by any other social justice movements. So it is our job as activists to bring the movement of animal rights into other social justice movements. Because think about it, our movement is made of people. This is the first movement that the victims cannot speak for themselves or can represent themselves, right? It's easier for gay people to have a movement because they can speak for themselves. When it comes to animals, they need us to represent them. So if we want to get closer to animal liberation, we have to win people. And we're only gonna win people if we are considering their needs of race, their needs of gender, their needs of sexuality, sexual identity. If we don't consider those things, we're not gonna get close to convincing people to join the movement. It's pretty simple. The other very important part, to make it very clear, is that definitely, I always say it, veganism is not enough. veganism for me is only the first step into the right direction. So I don't want to say that, I don't want to take the credit away from vegans and say, you're not good enough and like all that. It's not about this. It's just that you have to be conscious on the fact that veganism is like the minimum you can do. It's like only the first step into our goal. Just being vegan alone, just eating kale or eating tofu, you're not saving animals. I'm sorry, that's the blunt truth of it. Veganism is basically the non-participation in the violence against animals, and we cannot think that we are changing social norms and cultural norms just by non-participating into systemic violence. So I'll give you an example. Just because I am not participating in activities that are racists doesn't mean that I am helping Black people to achieve their liberation, right? So just because I am not a sexist person does not mean that I am making the world better for women. If I really want to make the world better for women, I have to be out there on the streets. I have to engage myself in actions that are fighting for their rights. So the same thing goes with animals. If you really want to make social and cultural changes, because obviously the animal rights movement is a social justice issue. It is a social justice issue. You have to be out there on the streets. You have to engage yourself in groups that are actually creating actions to end speciesism. So in particular to me, I don't focus on veganism just because, well, a lot of reasons. First, because not enough. Second, because I don't care about making more vegans. I care about making more activists. So I don't want more passive vegans. That's not going to change anything. We need to have active vegans that are fighting for animal liberation. And third is that veganism is seen a lot as a diet, or as a choice or something like that, which it's not. It's not a diet, obviously, and it's also not enough. So if you really want to make a difference, please come join any animal rights group. You can start your own. You can join Collectively Free, whoever you feel more comfortable with. But don't think that just by eating your tofu and talking about recipes that you're actually making a difference for the animals. I definitely consider animal rights to be a social justice issue. I mean, there's no doubt for it. Victims are being oppressed. So there we go. We have to fight for those victims. It's a serious issue. It's a huge number. I think we're probably around 70 billions of animals now. I'm sure the number is going to go up. If we think about fish, you can't really calculate how many victims are dying every year, but I think it's around 1 trillion of victims. So we're thinking about a systemic oppression. When we think about systemic oppression in all the senses, by institution, socialized, cultural, animals fall into all those categories of oppression. Therefore, it's pretty simple. It is a social justice movement, and we have to stop making of animal rights something that is cool and is like mainstream, and it has to do with diet, and it has to do with being cool or because celebrities do it. We're talking about victims in here, and this is something really serious. So there is no doubt that animal rights is a social justice issue, and political, obviously. Talking about strategies now on how to achieve animal liberation, I personally am a big fan and believer of direct action, specifically nonviolent, just because it has been proven throughout history that it has worked. If you think about LGBTQ rights, same thing. Direct action was the climax of what has really brought social change. You have to be provocative. You can't be apologizing and saying, I'm sorry about, interrupt. No, you gotta go and interrupt. You gotta really change the cultural norms. So open rescues is something I really admire. There's a very amazing group like 269 that does do open rescues, and Animal Liberation Victoria Obviously, the Animal Liberation Front too, so they don't do open rescues, they do more of underground rescues, but I think that's something very important. It sends a message, it sends a political and social message that's very strong, is I am willing to put myself out there to liberate animals. So I think pretty much direct action and rescuing and undercover investigations, obviously that's very, very important. It's through undercover investigations that we're able to tell people, look, this is what's going on in farms, you know, in laboratories. So those are pretty much, I think, the three main tactics that I'm a really big fan of. I think education is always good, but I don't have time. I don't want to dedicate my focus to that. I think I want to dedicate myself to more changing social and cultural norms than educating. There are a lot of groups that do education, and I don't want to take the merit off them, obviously. I think we all have to work together. You know, basically we all have to work together. Even if we disagree with tactics, we have to work together because our movement is already not big. It's a small movement, and it's very, very segregated, very divided, because obviously we think we know what's best for the animals, right? Because they can't tell us, hey, this is the best tactic, or this is the best tactic. So we just assume what are the best tactics. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the ones I'm a big fan of.
We are marching here today to celebrate love. So when I think about love, I think about my wife, I think about my family, I think about my friends from all creeds and cultures and race and ages and sexual orientation and gender identity. I think about all my brothers and sisters whose struggles we are allies with, who are never men, women, immigrants, people of color, people with disabilities, LGBTQ community members, and animals. Let's not forget that animals too are part of a system of oppression called speciesism. And speciesism is a form of discrimination. It is the assumption that animals are inferior to humans based on species alone. And I too once thought I was inferior because of my sexual orientation, because I am a woman, and because of my immigration status. So I know what it is like to be discriminated because of who I am. And I imagine many of you here today have experienced similar systemic oppression. In that sense, we are all allies with animals. Animals deserve our equal rights and consideration. They are individuals.